I am at Mill Dam, Ulverston, the beginning of Garden Terrace, where Stanley Street comes up to meet it. And we have two things on land that was left to the town by Mr. Woodburn of the mill, the town mill. He left it, as I understand it, to be a playground for the children of the town. What we now have is sheltered housing on the right and a park on the left. As I understand it, the sheltered housing was built on the land that was in effect nicked from what should have been a playground. Tony Woodburn intended it to be a playground, but they built sheltered housing. And they didn't build, nothing was done with the park. We had a pile of rubble next to it. I know because I was involved in the fight with South Laken District Council for them to fulfill their agreement to build a park, instead of just leaving the pile of rubble that was left behind in building this very nice housing. In the process, in building the housing, they built a fence around it. Now, the fence round sheltered housing, as you'll see, is very, very smart because it's only just been replaced. In my view, not entirely necessarily. It could have just had a touch of paint. But they've got a beautiful fence here, looking very smart, which goes up to here and stops. So here we have the end. Now there's an argument going on because here around the corner we also have fencing which is in a shocking state and really does need replacing, whereas the fence around the sheltered housing, in my view, didn't need replacing. Now this fence is a continuation of the fence round the sheltered housing. Maybe not this particular fence, but fencing was put here when the sheltered housing was built before this was a park. So this land here, I remember in 1984, was a pile of rubble that was left over from the builders of the lovely sheltered housing across there. So what happened, we ended up with sheltered housing but no park, and we kicked up a stink about it, and we made South Laken District jump so that they came and put in a park finally. So the fence we see across here is not the park fence at all. It was there originally around the sheltered housing and is the responsibility of the sheltered housing. It was there first when there was no fence whatsoever around the land here. At the moment, the sheltered housing group are trying to argue that this is not their fence and is the park's responsibility, and thus the park's, if it's the park's responsibility, it's not going to get replaced. They haven't got any money. However, they should not be let off the hook. Sheltered housing have a responsibility to maintain this fence, going right back to 1980 when the sheltered housing was built. And at the moment, it seems as though the parks have accepted responsibility for the fence, letting sheltered housing off the hook, which will mean that nothing will be done because the parks don't have any money, and this is scandalous. So sheltered housing get a beautiful new fence in the front when in my view it didn't need replacing. And here, with fencing that clearly does need replacing, that's rotting and falling apart. See here? this clearly does need replacing and it's not getting done. And I'm not putting up with it. So I've approached Colin Pickthall, who is now our town councillor, standing for Labour, and Helen Irving, who is not only town councillor but district councillor, and Margaret Hornby, who is our new town councillor, all three of them to get involved and support me in getting this fence repaired and replaced. At the moment, the response I've got from Colin Pickthall is very disappointing. He says he has no influence at all because he's only a town councillor. My viewpoint is that he is a representative of North Ward and can therefore put our views forward as an official view, which is far more effective than an individual like myself trying to get something done. He and Helen Irving need to work together to ensure that this fence is replaced and demonstrate that councillors really can be effective. At the moment, we are the people who are more effective. Here's an example. In our park, this bench has been derelict for 2 years. It just had one plank across, so people were able to sit on it, but in a very uncomfortable way. I talked with Tony Naylor and he promised me that he could provide the materials so we could do the work. That was 2 years ago. Luckily, I found out that the park engineer's name is Peter Clark, and the minute that I contacted him, and that was only last Tuesday, he provided the wood for us, and it arrived on Thursday, and we drilled the holes, bought the bolts and put it together with this very attractive bench now. We put it together on Saturday afternoon. So it looks like councillors are a waste of time, and if you want something done, you do it yourself.